Hi everyone, I am back with my January design team project for the Graphics Fairy. And this month we're right in the middle of winter here in Ontario, and it's been extremely cold and snowy, and so I really wanted to do something that was more spring-like. So I will show you what I've done inside, but for the cover of this little journal I have used one of the book cover printable images, of course from the Graphics Fairy, and I have just adhered it to a chipboard cover. And if you've been following my projects over the past few months, you'll know that I really like to do this just to mimic a really authentic old book. And so I've done that again this month. What I did was reduce this printable image in size. Now let me tell you how big this is. This is 4¼ by about 7 1/8. And those are some of the options on my printer. So you would have to use your printer to see how you could size this image. But I have used the same image just on the front and on the back. And then to make sure it was very durable and the colors were brought out, I used some Tim Holtz Distress Glaze to protect it and seal, because this is inkjet, printed on an inkjet printer. And then I just coated everything with some Mod Podge. So it really has brought out the colors and the detail in this image really nicely. And then the other thing that I did was use one of the lace frame printables from that bundle, and I've reduced it in size to one of the smaller sizes available on my printer. And then I've just added some coffee dyed paper underneath, and I've used my favorite note stamp. And then I've just closed it with a little bit of coffee dyed seam binding. So let me show you what I've done. So, yearning for spring, I've used a lot of creams and pinks and greens in this journal, and I've also used lots of kind of airy laces and lots of florals. So let me show you what I've done inside. So I've left the front cover plain. I usually do that. I think there's lots of things throughout the journal, but this, you could add a pocket to the front as well. So just some really pretty floral paper here. This is some vintage ledger paper that I've added. And then this printable from the Graphics Fairy. I've printed just on some vellum and just added some really pretty trims here and some buttons. And if you've watched my videos, you'll know that I do like to leave lots of space in journals. But I really like the look of kind of a fully embellished journal, so I usually add a lot of things to the edges of my pages. So it adds that visual impact, but also leaves lots of room to add photos and write. So in this pocket, I have a couple of printables here, and if you're on the blog, you'll see at the very bottom of the little write-up, I've listed all of the bundles that I've used, so you can find where I've found these images to use. And then this is just an embossed tag, and I've just backed it with a little bit of coffee dyed paper. It's great for journaling. Here I've made a large tag, and I've just clipped it on here. Oh, here we go. And I've added some just really pretty floral paper and a little label there, and that's just a pocket and lots of room for journaling. Some vintage French paper here. And this is the center of the signature, and I've just made a little pocket, and I've got a vintage recipe in there. And this really pretty floral rose pattern is from one of the Graphics Fairy bundles. On the back of this, I've just left a flap, so lots of room for journaling there. This is the other part of this vintage French paper, and I really thought that was a great spot. I didn't attach anything to it. I thought it would be a great spot to, you know, add some photos just along the side here, or you know, tip in a journaling spot or something like that. So I've just left that, and it's got this great writing on the other side. I mentioned I like to add tabs. So for this one, I've just used some coffee dyed sheer fabric, added a little bit of cheesecloth, and then this really pretty rose for the center. I've got just a little coffee dyed bag here, and some trim, and just a couple of real vintage pieces. That's a French calling card, and then just a vintage French tag there. The other part of that vintage ledger paper. And on the back, I've added this really pretty lace as a pocket. And then this was just the back of an envelope. I just thought it was so interesting. I guess the part of the letter has kind of bled onto the back of the envelope. I think this was from 1928. You can see there's the stamp. So it's just a really pretty piece. I thought you could add some paper or do some journaling on it. It just interesting. And then this is just a vintage letter. I thought that I would add. I just love this writing. It's just so pretty. So that's just an interesting piece of ephemera to add. Some vintage receipt here, and then this is another one of my favorite laces that I've added as a pocket, and then just that really pretty hydrangea, and then I've just got in this glassine bag, I've just got a little French flash card, a little bit of trim here. So you can see how I've tried to keep it a little bit light and airy, a little bit more springy looking. It's printable from the Graphics Fairy. And just a little bit of trim there. And in the center of this signature, I have another vintage tag, and this is just a vintage label that I had, and then that really pretty floral journaling card, The Language of Flowers. I just added a couple of pockets there with a little bit of trim. Here I have this really interesting vintage photograph of that lady. This is Ruth from February 15th of 1925. And then this is one of the printable receipts from the Graphics Fairy. And I love adding these things in. I just really think that they add visual interest, but they're also a great spot, some extra journaling space, because these little books get filled up pretty quickly, and so it just adds a really nice, it's just a really nice addition for some journaling space. Again, an image from the Graphics Fairy. I love that. So pretty. And some really pretty trims here. Another tab I've added. Again, I've used that sheer fabric for the base, and then I've just added some, just an offcut of some really pretty lace that I had. And here I have clipped on one of the Graphics Fairy receipts again, that blue one. A little bit more trim. And here in this pocket, again, that's some of the pattern paper from the Graphics Fairy that I've just printed on some vellum. And I've just added a couple of things here. That's a stamp that I like to use. And then just this vintage postcard I thought had a really nice spring feel to it. And then this French kind of calligraphy paper. Here I have one of the floating pockets that I like to do, and this is just a tag that I've cut from some of the music paper from one of the, I think it's called Vintage Music Papers bundle, but again, it'll be listed below. Some vintage tracing, I guess it's not tracing paper, I guess it's copy paper really, but I'd really just like kind of the fonts and the different stamps on here. More vintage paper there. Here's another sheer lace that I've used as a pocket. It's so pretty with that. It's heavily embroidered, kind of roses, and I thought this tag went really nicely with that. So I just added a little bit of seam binding at the top. A little bit of trim again, so you can see lots of space for journaling in this. Some vintage French composition book paper there, and another of those tabs with the little rose on them. And this is a printable from the Graphics Fairy. In this pocket, I've added just this little booklet. I love adding these to journals as well. It's another great way to add some space. I've used just a pretty floral image here and just a real variety of different types of papers. This has a little pocket here, different sizes to add some interest. This is just a craft envelope that I've added, and I've cut the end off the side, so there's lots of space to add things. This would be great maybe if you're going away for overnight or something. That would be a great little booklet just to write down what you did and add a few photos and just store it in that little pocket. In this side I have just a couple of printables from a couple of the different bundles from the Graphics Fairy. Just lots of interesting graphics on these. And there we go. That is my project for January. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you for my project for February. Thanks, everyone.